What's up, YouTube? This is Too Raw for TV. Alright, so this is a comparison video that was requested of me by a subscriber, and they wanted me to do a video where I compared these three and who I thought overall was the best player. And I think you guys already know who I think is the best, but let's go ahead and do this anyway. So, Shaquille O'Neal, Hakeem Olajuwon, Wilt Chamberlain, three of the greatest big men the game has ever seen. And I know today's NBA, the big man really is an afterthought. Now, thank goodness you have Nikola Jokic, Joel Embiid with his crying ass, and Giannis, even though technically he plays power forward. You have seen a resurgence in the big man in the past few years, but there once was a time when the big man ruled the NBA, and the conventional wisdom was, if you want to win a championship, you got to build a team around a great big man. Now, when it comes to championships, if you're going to judge players by that, then Shaq would be number one, right? Shaq has 4 championships to his credit. Wilt Chamberlain only has 2. Olajuwon only has 2. But it's funny when you say only has 2, like 2 championships don't mean anything. But, you know, there's some negatives about Shaq and even Hakeem that people don't really talk about too much. People always talk about how Wilt only won 2 championships. Why didn't he win more? But Shaq holds the record, if I'm not mistaken, for most playoff series getting swept. 1994 against the Pacers in the first round. 1995 NBA Finals. 1996 Eastern Conference Finals against the Bulls. And the NBA Finals was against the Rockets. I think he got swept again, which would be number 4. He got swept in the 1998 Western Conference Finals against the Lakers. The year before that, it was 4-1. Against the Jazz. The year before that, it was 4-1, I think. Then they got swept again in 1999 in the Western Conference Finals against the Spurs. And then Shaq got swept one last time for the 6th time in his career when they were the defending world champion Heat. They got swept in the first round by the Bulls. So Shaq has a lot of blemishes too. Hakeem Olajuwon, for all of his greatness, there's one thing that a lot of people don't know about Hakeem. It hurts him. In the 18 years that Hakeem Olajuwon played, 2 championships. Yes. 3 finals MVPs. Remarkable. But did you know that in 9 of the 18 seasons Hakeem has played in, his team either lost in the first round or did not qualify for the playoffs? That's a lot of losing. And some of the teams they lost to, they should have easily beaten. But see, that's what happens when one player like Wilt, there's an agenda against him, and people repeat the same things over and over and over again. He lost to Bill Russell. Why did he lose to Bill Russell? But, other people have dubious things on their record, but people don't talk about it that much. But as far as scoring is concerned, Shaq was more of a physical presence, much more of a physical presence. He used his size and strength to his advantage when he was scoring. And that was Shaq's game. Now, if he was playing in the 60s, he wouldn't be able to play like that. You couldn't lower your shoulder into the opponent like that. All right? Hakeem Olajuwon was the opposite. Olajuwon was skilled. Olajuwon was about footwork and a plethora of post moves that he had been working on and refining for about a decade until you started seeing them being displayed in the early to mid 1990s. He had more range than Shaq. I would say he was a consistent shooter out to about 19 feet, maybe even 20 feet. And he could, on some occasions, knock down a three-pointer. Wasn't a three-point shooter per se like that, but he could knock them down. Wilt, it's hard to say about his game sometimes because when you look at some of his earlier footage, look, he couldn't play like Wilt when he was playing. So, I mean, he couldn't play like Shaq when he was playing. So, earlier on, you saw more of the skill set. Him putting the ball on the floor. Him shooting fadeaway, shooting jumpers. But as time went on, and he got bigger and a little bit less mobile, especially I would say from 68, 69 onward, you started seeing him playing more in the post. And Shaq, excuse me, I don't know how I keep saying Shaq, and I don't know how I keep doing that. But Wilt really couldn't play a power game until the NBA began changing some of their rules around 1969, 1970. Or as I call it, the headband Wilt era. That's when centers couldn't double hand check anymore. That's when you had to give the offensive player a little bit more space. And that's when Wilt was able to break free and dunk more. And plus the dunk was beginning to gain more popularity. Back in the 50s and into the 60s, when you dunked the basketball, it was seen as showing up the opponent and was frowned upon. Although I think there was some racial connotations behind that too. Because nobody seemed to mind when, a player like, what's his name? Played with the Lakers. Blanking right. Jim Pollard. Nobody seemed to mind when Jim Pollard dunked the basketball too much. But anyway, they all were different offensively. Shaq won a scoring title twice, 1995 and 2000. Wilt won it 7 times. Could have probably won it more had he not been so agreeable to change his game for the betterment of the team. A lot of these guys, when they're superstars, they don't want to alter their games. Hakeem never won a scoring title. But that's not to say he couldn't score big. He could. Early on in his career, he was sharing scoring duties as the Twin Towers with Ralph Sampson and Robert Reed. And then there was a time when they was running the offense, the Houston Rockets. I think the coach was Don Chaney. When the offense was running through the guards, the offense was running through guys like Kenny Smith and Vernon Maxwell. They were shooting more shots than the King. And then it wasn't until Rudy Tom-Jones became the head coach that the offense began to run through Hakeem Olajuwon, and they got him some more help. And then that's when you saw them win those back-to-back championships. So they all had different scoring styles. Hakeem Olajuwon is the greatest post scorer I think the game has ever seen. But as far as skill set. But Wilt Chamberlain was the most dominant post scorer we've ever seen. I mean, you're never going to see a guy averaging 37.6, 38.4, 50.4, 44 point. We're not going to see that ever again. So when it comes to offense, I give the edge to Wilt Chamberlain. Rebounding. I don't think I even need to go into this. You could actually argue that Shaq was an underwhelming rebounder. He was better on earlier in his career when he was a little bit more limber, lighter, jumped a little bit higher, more moved better. But as he got heavier and older, I mean, he could get you 10 rebounds a game, but he really should have been giving you more than that. And he never won a rebounding title. Hakeem Olajuwon, on the other hand, I believe he did lead the NBA in rebounding a couple of years. I want to say he led the league in rebounding twice. top of my head, I want to say twice. Let's see here. Yeah. 1988, 89, and 89-90. Hakeem Olajuwon led the NBA in rebounding. So this was a guy that was really just 6'10", really, maybe 6'10 and a half, whatever you want to say. He led the NBA in rebounding twice, so he was a very, very good rebounder. But Wilt Chamberlain is, I know people say Dennis Rodman, but when you amass 23,924 rebounds, when you lead the NBA in rebounding 11 of the 14 years you played, you're the GOAT rebounder to me. And actually, the edge here goes to Wilt Chamberlain. I don't really think it's much of a discussion. Defense. Well, I'm going to put Shaq out of the equation. Not to say he was a bad defender. He was good. But once again, he could have been better. Shaq was a selective shot blocker. He didn't go after everybody. He went after people that he thought that he could block, that he could dominate. Shaquille. So look, Shaq is not going to be in this conversation right here. Between Wilt and Hakeem, Wilt was, I think, an underrated defender. A very underrated defender. People focus more on his offense, but he was a great shot blocker. And even though they didn't count it back then, supposedly he got a lot of steals for a big man, especially when he was younger. He got a lot of steals for a center. Hakeem Olajuwon led the NBA in blocks, I want to say 3 times. Yeah. 89-90, 90-91, 92-93. I think in 91-92 it was David Robinson. Olajuwon was one of the best shot blockers in the history of the NBA. He's the official leader in block shots, but they didn't start counting that until the year after Wilt Chamberlain retired, and I wonder why that's the case. Most experts tend to believe that if you were to count blocks going back to 1946 when the league started, or at least 1949 when technically the NBA started, that the all-time leader in block shots would probably be Wilt Chamberlain, followed by Bill Russell, then maybe somebody like Nate Thurman, then Kareem, and then Olajuwon. Because the first 4 years of Kareem Abdul-Jabbar's career isn't counted as far as blocks either. So when it comes to defense, man-to-man defense, help defense, I mean, Olajuwon has two Defensive Player of the Year awards. Now, I know that award didn't exist when Wilt played, but I just feel like I have to give the edge to Hakeem Olajuwon on that one. I just feel like I got to give the edge to Hakeem. Athleticism, Wilt Chamberlain, and let's keep it moving. Basketball IQ, I would give it to Wilt. Wilt could have been a coach. Technically, he did coach in the ABA a little bit, I think, with the San Diego Conquistadors. I think he did. Wilt knew the game of basketball. Not to say the other two didn't. They were really good. Hakeem was a natural athlete that learned the game pretty quickly. He came to the game pretty late. And not to say Shaq doesn't know the game, but to me, listening to the three talk, I just tend to think Wilt was more of a basketball savant than than the other two were in comparison. So basketball IQ, I'll give it to Wilt. Resume, Wilt. Playmaking. Wilt is the guy that led the league in assists. I think he averaged, 4.4 assists per game. The other two became better passers as their careers went on. But I would give it to Wilt. Am I forgetting some categories? Durability, maybe. Shaq and Hakeem both played a very long time. Shaq for 19 years. Olajuwon played 18 years. Wilt played for 14 years. It wasn't for the rules at the time, he would have played 15 years. But if you're talking about longevity, then the Shaq. Durability, I think, is Wilt. I mean, the injury that he came back from, they were talking about in the recent documentary, where he came back from an injury that Andrew Roberson, I think it was his name, Andrew Roberson, that played for the Thunder, suffered the same injury that Wilt Chamberlain suffered back in 2017. He'd never been able to come back to the NBA. And that was 6 years ago. Wilt Chamberlain came back in less than 5 months. And that shows you his dedication, his work ethic, and his recuperative powers. This is also a man that possibly may have suffered a minor heart attack in the early to mid 60s and came back and played. Possibly. I mean, at the time they said that he had pancreatitis, but now some people think that he may have had a slight heart attack. Then, of course, this is a guy that was playing for his career 45 minutes a game, had one season averaging 48.5 minutes per game, never fouled out in the game. Look, overall, man, you gotta give it to him, man, Wilt Chamberlain. But for some reason, people would rate Shaq ahead of Wilt, which befuddles the shit out of me. But it is what it is, man. So I come with Wilt, but some people may disagree. And then I'm going to go with this too. Out of the three guys here, who had the better teammates? Altogether, I would say Shaq. I mean, Shaq played with Penny Hardaway. Shaq played with Nick Anderson, the premier three-point shooter of his era, Dennis Scott. Then later on, he played with Kobe, obviously. Then Dwayne Wade. Played with Steve Nash. Excuse me. Played with Steve Nash. Played with LeBron James, then the Big Three in Boston. I mean, come on. Now, Olajuwon did go some years without playing with some talent around him, and that's one of the reasons why he was nearly traded back before the 1992-93 season. Wilt went many years without playing with a great player around him until he got to the Sixers. Then he, of course, went to the Lakers, and he had some great players there, but they were a little bit in their twilights, as was Wilt. So when it comes to guys playing on stacked teams, Shaq. So, yeah, I give it to Wilt, man. Tell me what you guys think.